Well, Josh Marshall is founder and editor of Talking Points Memo, and the Washington Post. Chris Solis is an MSNBC political analyst. I disagree, by the way, completely with his use of Kennedy. Kennedy was not a hawk. Kennedy was a very balanced defender of this country. He was very careful about employing U.S. force overseas. We didn't go to war in Berlin. We didn't go to war in Cuba twice. We cut a deal in Laos. He did everything he could to avoid bloodshed and also defend the country. He wasn't Joe Lieberman. What do you think of this? Lieberman was pushed out because he supported the Iraq war and still does.
That was the core issue, but I think there was a dance that went on between Lieberman and the core of the Democratic Party over several years, and they each got under each other's skin. And I think Iraq was the key thing. But remember,
why did he double down by backing McCain in the last election? Wasn't that just shoving it to the Democrats?
I think a lot of this comes from Lieberman felt very bitter in 2004. He thought he at least should have the kind of he should have been a contender for the presidential primary in 2004, and he wasn't even close. And I think that embittered him, and I think a lot of things sort of came out of that. I think that's played a bigger role than people realize.
What do you think of that? What do you think of that, Chris? You study politics in a non-partisan way.
Sure.
Do you think he was rip about the fact? I know he went nowhere in that, but he was pretty hawkish after supporting the war. He should have known there was a problem.
I think Josh has a very good point here. I think, look, Joe Lieberman was the this is the thing I always remind myself about Joe Lieberman. In an 8-year span, he went from the Democratic vice presidential nominee to speaking at the Republican National Convention. Something happened there.
And trying to get on the ticket,
Politics didn't change that much. His relationship with John McCain personally wasn't that important. And I do think that race, as Josh pointed out, that 2004 race, look, he was the 2000 vice presidential nominee. I think he got into the 04 race thinking, I'm in the top tier of this thing. He wound up in New Hampshire making that now famous line, a three-way tie for third when he had finished in 5th place in New Hampshire. And I do think that embittered him in some way, that he felt like the party had left him. Now, Chris, just very quickly, the party may have left him a little bit, but he clearly left the party too. Look, it's never been okay, whether a Republican or a Democrat, to endorse the other guy in a presidential race and speak at the other guy's convention.
Yeah, and he was all by himself in supporting that war. Here's Daily Kos founder Marcus Melitsas wrote this morning about Lieberman, quote, "We were going to kick his butt," that was my translation, "and it was going to feel great, but I'll take this, and others, they'll take this departure." Josh, this is really important, the power of the netroots. I look at the numbers. I don't think they have a majority of the Democratic Party that are really that liberal or that left, if you will. I don't mind the word left, by the way. I hope they don't. But they do have intensity. And the question is, does their intensity give them power to knock off another senator they don't like because of, say, his war policy or his economic policy?
Certainly possible. I think, the thing with the netroots is they may be a little more liberal than the entirety of the Democratic Party, but it's not just an ideological thing. It's more of a kind of a fighting spirit that Kos and people like him have. So, yeah, I think they could knock off another, but Lieberman is sort of sui generis, I think. He's on his own. And again, I think the thing is that there was, even after 2006, Lieberman, with all the embitteredness, he could have done stuff in 2000, over the last 4 years that would have made it possible for him at least to have a fighting chance.
He also says things that are just not believable. Like here he is talking to the Washington Post. There is such an ideological orthodoxy among Democrats that if you're not there 100% of the time, you're not there. Well, give me a break. He opposed them on the major foreign policy issue of our time, the war in Iraq, and he expects to be loved for that. Let's take a look at something he said on Morning Joe, because I want to argue about this for about 3 years now, but I only have a few minutes. I want you guys to do the arguing. I couldn't disagree more with what he said today on Morning Joe. Let's listen to Joe Lieberman in this ridiculous defense of his hawkish foreign policy. Here he is. Let's listen.
My answer is yes. My answer is yes because Saddam was threatening the stability of the entire region. He'd shown that by his actions. I believe that the evidence is very clear that he was developing weapons of mass destruction. Obviously, we don't have evidence that he had a big program, but the most official and comprehensive reports show that's true. He was also, the evidence shows, beginning really tactically to support the terrorist movements that had attacked us on 9/11. And today, to make a long story short, instead of a brutally repressive dictator in Iraq, we've got a government that was elected, that's self-governing, and the country's self-defending.
Guilty, guilty, guilty. And I rarely get this upset, but guilty, guilty, guilty. Once again, using the right-wing trick of conflation, using phrases like weapons of mass destruction. If you think they got a nuclear weapon in development, tell us. Stop using words weapons of mass destruction. If you think they're tied in with al-Qaeda, say so. Don't say they have tactical involvement with some of these groups. Everybody knows they were helping out Hamas in that region over there. Nobody has any evidence that had anything to do with the groups that attack us with al-Qaeda. No one has any belief that they had a nuclear weapon on development. So he uses that mushy language of weapons of mass destruction, the perfect lingo of the neocons, and then he throws in this tactical. What does this mean? You go to war because somebody's tactically involved with some regional terrorist groups and it's an Arab country, big surprise. You don't go to, there's a lot of those countries involved tactically with terrorists, and you don't go to war with them. So what kind of BS is he shoveling at us now? My question to you, Chris Cillizza, nonpartisan Chris Cillizza.
Here's what I would say, Chris. I think that statement is vintage Lieberman. I'm not asking you to like it. I'm not asking you to like it or not like it, but he views himself, and again, agree or disagree, he views himself as acting out of moral rectitude, that he does the right thing morally. The right thing was to go in and unseat Saddam Hussein, and he is dug in on that position. I just wanted to quickly go back to what Josh said, too, which I think is important. Joe Lieberman did this to Joe Lieberman. If in 2006 he had said, you know what, Democrats, I hear what you have to say, let me re-examine where I'm at, and spent the next 6 years fixing that problem, he could have won. But it does not pass the political smell test what he said in his retirement announcement, that he's never run from a fight. There is a simple fact. He could not win a Democratic primary.
You know, he gets into that lachrymose manner, that post-nasal drip he does, which is so serious and, you know, oh, God, I understand your feelings. And, you know, to me, it's an act. I'm sorry. He is a man of the right. Fair enough. He's in the wrong party.
Yeah, I mean, you know, the thing is when he's saying this stuff about, you know, as you call it, conflation, you know, you talk to Don Rumsfeld now. He's past that. Yeah. He's not even pulling that out. Ex-President Bush isn't. So it's almost sad to see him like, that's like 2004, man. I mean, even the
great irony is I like Joe Lieberman. I disagree completely with the guy, and I like him. I'm sorry. It's so weird in politics.
It comes from this. It comes from this this belief that politics is about doing the morally right thing, and he believes this is a morally right thing, and he's not going to walk away from it.
Well, I think you know what? He's in there. If he did it, it must be moral. I think that there's some of that there, too.
The voice of the Oracle of Thebes. Thank you, sir. Josh Marshall, I'm falling in love